Well, I know a few motorists that are concerned, but Sharon Epperson, thank you ever so much this evening. Now, folks, amid conflicting reports about increased oil output, continued Libyan unrest, and gas prices soaring, should the Obama administration be considering military options to help protect our oil interests in the Middle East? Here now, once again, is former Shell Oil President and CEO John Hofmeister. He's the founder of Citizens for Affordable Energy. Ken Timmerman, Newsmax.com contributing editor and author of St. Peter's Bones. And terrorism and national security expert Ken Robinson, founder of Greenhouse Holdings. Thank you very much, gentlemen. John Hofmeister, let me start with you. At the beginning of this day, actually last night, the reports coming off the news wires were saying that Saudi Arabia and OPEC would make up the Libyan shortfall. Now I'm not so sure. Can you help us on this? Will Saudi Arabia and the rest, or will they not, put another 1 million barrels a day on the market soon? April, late March, whenever?
Well, Larry, I think if OPEC felt that this was really a crisis, you would see them making all the noise and all the motions about having an emergency meeting. And none of that's taking place. But there are signals coming out from the OPEC community that nobody is going to be harmed if they exceed their quota. In other words, I think that what OPEC will do is, rather than make a formal announcement, which brings extraordinary attention to what they're doing, they will instead simply let more oil into the market by various countries that can, exceeding their agreed-upon quota. So if Saudi Arabia has a quota of 8, it might start producing 9, and I believe that's what's happening. And that could happen with other countries as well.
All right, well, that's very important and very helpful. Ken Timmerman, I want to come back to you because, all right, Libya is the center. We have the Saudi Arabian Day of Rage on Friday, but let's talk Libya. When I looked last evening, the paper said Gaddafi circled debates regime's end. It looks like they were getting ready to go out of town. Today, Ken, on the other hand, Gaddafi loyalists launched new attacks. There are pictures and reports of vicious attacks on the pro-democracy rebels by the Gaddafi military, whoever they are. Now, Ken Timmerman, what is going to happen here in your judgment? And is Gaddafi anywhere near giving up and leaving?
No, Gaddafi is not anywhere near getting ready to leave, Larry. On the contrary, he's digging in his heels. He's understood that there are really only 2 ways to deal with this kind of protest in the Middle East. Either you give in, you give up, which is what happened in Tunisia and in Egypt, or you dig in your heels and you fight, as Gaddafi himself has said, to the last man, to the last drop of blood. This is going to get very bloody. It's going to get very violent.
All right, let me go to, let's see, Mr. Robinson, you're out there someplace. Let me go to you. I want to ask you, Bret Stephens' article in the Wall Street Journal today, very hard-hitting. He said, if Gaddafi succeeds in hanging on and continuing to rule Libya, that signal of weakness would be devastating and catastrophic to United States interests, to European interests, and to the interest of peace everywhere, that we must not let Gaddafi do this. What's your take here? What, if anything, should we do or can we do?
Well, he's right. For sure, if he stays, there's a real problem. You know, they are 2% of the oil producing, but it's a really sweet 2%, light sweet crude, and it will have an impact. But more importantly, the fact that the regime does not go with the popular uprising the way it is going to cause more instability, because it's going to lead to a civil war. And if there's a civil war, then for sure we're going to see these speculations on oil prices go up.
I would reckon so. And Ken Timmerman, let me just come back to you on this key point. If the Western powers and NATO and the United States allow Gaddafi and his forces to do what they're doing and slaughter the rebels and stay on, what message does that send to Syria? What message does that send to the dictators in Iran? What message does that send to the anti-democracy forces all around the world about the United States?
Well, answered. Obviously, this sends a message of weakness. It's a disaster. It's something we cannot allow to happen. Look, the White House has gone way over the line on this, Larry. They've said they want Gaddafi gone. Once the United States government at the highest level makes a statement like that, we had better carry through on this. If you say you're going to kill the king, you'd better do it. Right now, they're saying, well, we really want to do this. They're speaking very loudly and carrying a limp spaghetti. We look weak. The Iranians understand this. They have their agents inside Libya. There's even talk of Iranians having bases on the ground in there. If we want Gaddafi to go, we had better be arming the rebels and doing it soon.
John Hofmeister, you're a man of the world. You've been operating in these global oil markets. This Libya thing is bigger than oil. Oil is just part of it. What happens if Gaddafi manages to stay? In other words, there are people saying the United States should enforce with NATO a no-fly zone, a no-tank zone. Some people say we should be arming the rebels. Are these things feasible in your judgment, or is this going to just freeze oil supplies, speculators, and investors everywhere?
Well, I'd offer two responses. If Gaddafi stays, then we're going to see this ongoing issue of Middle East turmoil affecting oil prices for months, perhaps longer, the rest of this year into next year. You have to ask the question, what can be done covertly? What could be done that is not putting the public, you know, the British or the French or the Germans or the Americans clearly on the line, but what can be done covertly? There's a lot of things that could be done that I think will help to undermine Gaddafi if there is a will to do something like that.
John Robinson, Ken Robinson, are these things being done? Are you confident, for example, in the next couple of weeks we're going to see Gaddafi gone?
I'm surprised that he hasn't been killed yet himself by his own security forces. There really is an end game there when you look at how much of the country is gone already. And the administration has signaled that all policy options are on the table, and one of the big policy options is covert action. And what I think the military is cautioning is it's not could we, it's should we. Because the capability exists. The question is the law of unintended consequences in the market. As you've seen with your own reporting today, the market's pretty confident that as long as a civil war doesn't happen, there's going to be plenty of supply to protect the issue of supply of oil. The real issue is what happens in Saudi Arabia if they actually have an insurrections there. The Saudi government is the bigger issue of insecurity, and the worry is if they do something in Libya, does that ripple to Saudi Arabia?
Well, I just wonder. That's a good point. Ken Tillman, let me just finish with you, quickly if you could. The day of rage on Friday in Saudi Arabia. What are you thinking? What are you hearing? What's going to happen? Is it going to be much ado about very little or nothing, or is it going to be a big deal that would really threaten oil markets?
Look, I don't think at this point it's going to be a big deal. There is no civil society in Saudi Arabia. They've not allowed it to develop. But, you know, the other Ken is absolutely right. Saudi is the big piece of this. If the Saudi regime goes down, we're not talking about 1.4 million barrels a day. We're talking about 10 million barrels. We're not talking about $140 oil. We're talking about $500 oil. So Saudi Arabia is absolutely the key piece of this. The Iranians are watching very, very closely. They would love to see it all topple down.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. John Hofmeister, Ken Timmerman, and Ken Robinson. We appreciate your points of view. The challenge to our economy, by the way, didn't just come out of the sky. It didn't all come out of Libya either. There's a moratorium on drilling in the Gulf, of development in Alaska, and who is suffering? The consumer, the motorist. Did President Obama set himself up for failure by pushing a high-tax green energy agenda? But first up, breaking news out of Libya itself. To report this evening, Gaddafi forces are gaining momentum on two fronts. There's some amazing video just in. We're going to take you there next.
America's biggest company breaks its silence on the Mideast crisis and rising crude prices. So what does the world's most powerful oil man fear most? A CNBC exclusive. Aaron Burnett and Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson. Tomorrow on Street Signs, 2 p.m. Eastern on CNBC.